Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Chris and Andre Show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Chris and Andre Show, episode 56. I'm Andre.
Oh, yeah, and I'm Chris.
Yeah, we've been kind of, somebody's been busy with life over in his neck of the woods. Don't know who that may be. So
Ding
we didn't record last week.
No, we didn't. Yeah, so I am in the process of doing a bunch of house renovations. For those of you that might be, I don't know, tech savvy enough or Google savvy enough to have found last week's episode in YouTube form, which we are, well, I say I am kind of working on. That was really just a test run. The idea was get this done and make sure this works, and then I'll be motivated to get the episode edited. Did not happen that way, but I did start editing not 2 weeks ago's episode today. So hopefully I'll get that up tomorrow. But yes, as Andre can see, I am now in my newly painted office with no popcorn ceilings anymore.
That's cool.
Which is literally like the best part of any of it. I mean, the going from like the dark stained trim to white is also a very nice, just like, oh, this feels so light and airy in here. Whereas before this felt like a dank, dark basement. Because my office is on the lower level of a split level, and so it's right on the concrete pad, which has the benefit of providing a nice sound dampening from a lot of external noise, but also makes it feel a little, I don't know, basement-y. Yeah, not even like creepy, but just basement-y. And then when you've got all the dark wood trim, and then like the den area outside here is all wood paneling, which I had painted over, and so like you didn't see like, but I don't know, for whatever reason, and I'm guessing it's just the colors that I had on there before and everything, the wood paneling and like that stupid little seam that they always have in it, it just really stood out. Like, this is just painted wood paneling. Now that it's been painted by professionals,
you can't even tell, or it looks like it's supposed to be there.
Yeah, like it just looks like it almost looks like an intentional, ooh, this is kind of nice, like I feel like somebody's gonna walk in, when I finally get around to selling this house and be like, ooh, I really like what they did. Like, I don't know, that's where I'm at right now. Is I had started watching a bunch of the renovation shows on Discovery Plus or whatever when we had our 1 week trial. And so everything that I'm seeing, I'm like, okay, like this is what we're going to do. This is what, is ultimately going to get us the best return on investment. And, it's like I've got a banister and I'm like, I think we should rip this out and put in something more modern.
Actually, well, you have a former realtor that was really good at staging houses.
Yes.
I was creepy good.
Yeah. And I will be taking full advantage of your skills when the time comes, my friend. Don't think I'm sleeping on that knowledge.
Oh, I was like, crap. I was like, man, it's like when you, like somebody has a kid, like, oh yeah, we'll babysit. I've learned not to say that. Like, I don't want to do that. Like,
now I don't want to call out. I don't want to ask you to call out anybody like specifically on the podcast, but I'll do it anyways. You, from what I recall, have had a certain, shall we say, distaste for one of the local realtors who's pretty well known around here. I think, is it Mike Spain, right? Something like that. Mark Spain. Mark Spain.
Yeah. Not loving that guy.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I've seen this guy's billboards.
It's a hustle.
Okay. Yeah. Here's nothing for the house that is
more
worth way more than this.
Yeah, more than likely it's tax value.
Right.
And he's going to flip it and make retail value on it. So, I'm not a big fan. There's a couple realtors in the area where I'm just not a big fan. And it's not that, and my wife says I'm a hater, and I'm not a hater. It's just like some people do shady stuff. You got to call it out. You can't be like Linda. Not a fan of Linda Craft either. She does kind of the same thing, but Mark Spain is he's got like a ton of money going into his advertising, like a ton. There's a couple of them. There's those two are the ones that really push my buttons when I see them, and Linda Craft not so much because she doesn't do the whole, um, I'll buy your house for you.
Yeah.
But Mark Spain, more than likely, that's what he's doing. So
Yeah, because it's this whole like guaranteed offer, right? I
yeah,
guarantee you'll get an offer on your house because I'm literally going to offer you nothing. Like,
yeah.
I'll make you an offer you couldn't take.
Yeah, you're gonna get tax value, and which is typically it all depends on which neighborhood, right? It could
Sure,
be
and it depends on what the individual homeowner's financial situation is,
right,
right? Like
right,
it could be where the tax value is potentially greater than or equal to roughly what the house is worth on the market because of whatever renovations and things need to be done.
right.
And so in that case, sure, if you don't want to go through the hassle
The
of
hassle,
of upgrading or getting it ready for putting it on the market and then dealing with it being on the market. But I guess it's just funny to me because I look at where the real estate market in Raleigh has been in the greater Wake County area, and I just think like if you're having trouble selling your house, like I got 90.
why?
If you're having trouble selling your house, I feel bad for you, son.
Yeah, I was literally thinking the same thing, but I'll tell you the number one reason it's pricing, right? So when you actually start to do the comps on a house, um, if you price it too high, and a lot of times you'll have some sellers that are like, oh, but I think it's worth this, or they say, well, my neighbor down the street, he sold his house for this, and it's like 10% higher than what it should be listed at. And when you start to do the comps, you notice like, well, they have a lot of things that you don't have, like uh, a Grecian shower, or like a chef's kitchen. There are things that just because you're in the same neighborhood don't make the house applicable to your comps
Yeah.
when you're doing getting that ready. So a lot of times it's pricing. It's how you list the house. And to pat myself in the back, because I am really proud of this. I typically listed and sold a house within 2% of the list price. So that means I was pretty spot on. So that meant the the sellers got the money they needed, and the people that bought the house got the house at a fair market value. So
I mean, and a lot of that, correct me if I'm wrong as the expert, um, at least amongst the two of us, but isn't that just a matter of really like doing your research, like doing your
yeah,
homework and pulling the comps
yeah,
and being, like a good real estate agent?
yeah. It goes back to it's just math,
Yeah,
right? And a lot of times you'll see like swings in appreciation, and like, you can actually see that within like month to month, right?
sure.
Um, and this area is typically a seller's market 90% of the time.
Yeah.
It's rarely a buyer's market. Um, but and there are deals, but you can even when you're buying a house, you can actually probably read through some of the BS. Um, like for example, you'll see a house that it'll show it's been on the market for 45, 60 days. But when you start doing research, you'll notice that this is the second or third time it's been on the market.
Yeah.
It's off the market for like, 3, 4 months in between the other two times. Um, and you start to understand that in a positive light for the seller, they can probably afford to keep it in the market a little bit longer. So that kind of shifts your negotiation power, right? Um, and there's other little tricks you can do. Like, I mean, you start to notice like trends, but you want to really do your homework, um, and understand math. I had a like it's just math.
Or
It's
invest in a calculator. I mean, it's
yeah, yeah.
like one or the other, people.
There are some things you just can't you can't BS around, so but it's an interesting uh field of work, and the only thing I really liked about it was the negotiation part of it. Everything else was kind of not my favorite, but I love to negotiate. I love to get the numbers right, to sell a house within the listing agreement. That was always a good feeling. But yeah, So
It reminds me, because I think a lot of our conversation previously about Mark Spain and the real estate market in Raleigh and all of that stuff um, came up right after we did the Habitat for Humanity building. And you and I didn't get the chance to do the same shift together, but, had worked
Right.
on the same house. And that was one of those things where I guess I'd never realized how comfortable I felt swinging a hammer until I got out there, and then it's like after you've been doing it for a little while and people are kind of like, oh wow, like you can actually do this. It's like, yeah, like I've been around construction sites enough
Right.
in my life and worked on, rebuilding a deck with my dad and, other
Right.
projects like that where it's like, yeah, I understand the basics of carpentry, and you point me in the right direction and make sure I'm not doing the wrong thing, like I'll probably be fairly useful. And that was one of my favorite things about that experience was, they come in and they very quickly seem to get a feel for what people are comfortable doing and who they kind of need to keep a close eye on and who they can more or less kind of say like, hey, go build that wall.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, cool, wall's built.
My favorite thing about the experience was actually helping people,
Oh,
like,
fine. Just fucking, I mean,
well, it's
no,
because
you make me look like a total asshole because I'm like, I like the fact that I swing a hammer, and Andre is like, I liked helping people. Jesus.
I mean, I look at it.
I'm just fucking with you.
I know. I ignored that part. I look at it for two ways. One, like that part of it. For your part, I build houses, so that's not. It's kind of like, no, this is not okay. So no, I enjoy building houses, but secondly, like I always rant about gentrification, and I just think that being able to actually roll your sleeves up and actually help people is actually beneficial.
Yeah, and I mean that does bring up another thing that I was thinking about recently, which is just the topic of like affordable housing, right? And what that ultimately really means, or like how we could look at going, like, because I wonder, to me, it's not the idea of saying here's an area of town where we're going to make the housing affordable, right?
Right.
Because what do you end up with there? The projects, right? Like, I mean, it becomes an area that, because of whatever reputation is developed, true or false, eventually businesses ultimately leave, right? There's this like negative connotation associated with being near those areas. And so to me, like what Habitat does, where they look for opportunities, to build these houses in established neighborhoods and those sorts of things, just provides such a better option. Like you're kind of mixing that affordable housing in with, but it's still like I'm trying to understand.
It's a slippery slope. I mean, I was coming back from or I passed through Greensboro yesterday, and there are quite a few neighborhoods along 40 where you can see where for whatever reason a developer builds a neighborhood. And one of my biggest pet peeves about houses is when you have a lot of water running off the side of the house, and it just turns it stains the house.
Yeah.
It drives me crazy. I can't stand to see that. And I could tell probably more than likely it was one of those quick buck like subdivisions where we're going to throw up 50 homes. We're going to price them like, let's say if the median home is like 250, we're going to price it $200,000. We're going to do our own financing. We're going to fill them up. We're going to help. We're not really help. We're going to push people in the loans, more than likely an adjustable rate. And I can predictably, you'll probably have foreclosures. I am a firm believer. I don't think that everybody needs to own a house. I do believe that you need to have like affordable housing. To me, doesn't mean like it's a home, like a single family home. I think that rents in general should be doable for at least 80% of the population of a city. And like you should be able to graduate to something bigger as your income allows you to. And I think that's where, because owning a house isn't just buying the house, it's maintaining it. Like I spent $8,000 on a furnace and air conditioner.
Right.
And not everybody has or can replace that system in their house if it goes bad.
And I think
Or
that, I mean, that's a really good point that a lot of people don't always take into consideration,
yeah,
right?
the tertiary expenses to owning a house, right?
Yeah, all
Uh,
of the like the amount of money that you kind of have to have saved up for the if this breaks, right? It's like if you're fortunate enough that you can get the insurance company to cover replacing your roof, good for you. Like I was in
right,
that situation,
right.
but for most people, that's a four or five
That's not a
thousand dollar
thing.
expense,
Yeah,
like at least, and
right,
yeah, it's definitely come back, or jumped up and bit me a number of times where,
right.
especially as a young homeowner where you don't have that, any real savings at that point. Um, Having an AC unit go out in the middle of the summer or finding out that, your furnace is completely dead and should have been replaced 5 years ago. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, like those are the moments where you're kind of like, how am I going to eat?
right.
And it's, we talk about like predatory lending practices and that sort of thing, but it's like, I mean, I had, heating companies that were ready to help me finance, like my gas
Yep.
company was like, oh, we'll just add it to your bill. No problem. You know,
Could be paying it for 40 years. Like,
Exactly. I mean, it was like a 5 year loan that I ended up with for
right,
replacing a furnace, and it
right,
like for 5 years, my gas bill, which is normally even in the winter, like $30 was
right,
over $150.
right. Yeah,
And
those are things I always think about when people talk about the housing crisis that we currently have. It goes back to common sense, like economics. Like, are you really uh, even with economics, you have to decide what are you trying to accomplish, and oftentimes or not, we forget that, and we want to do pie in the sky. And I'm not saying people should not every. I actually am. Not everybody needs a house. They just need affordable housing, and that could be whether that be an apartment, a townhome, or something that you can rent in a nice community that has access to schools, healthcare, and access to employment, the things that actually make a community. Not everybody should be a homeowner. That is a myth. Um, and if you don't agree with that, and I know a lot of people do not agree with that. And I know that there are like systematic problems with that statement where people's, but it's not about race for me. It's about like the financial, if you want to see some of the disparities in economics change from generation to generation, don't put people in debt. So be realistic about things that happen. So yeah, so I was actually thinking about housing and the $15 minimum wage because I'm like, neither one of those solutions that I hear about makes sense. I do understand that historically generational wealth is typically started with home ownership. I do understand that historically, but I don't think it's all the time true.
sure.
Uh,
I mean, there are bad real estate investments, right?
right.
And if you don't believe that, I've got some waterfront property in Florida that I'd love to sell you. Um, yeah, I mean there are plenty of bad real estate investments out there for
Right.
sure. And so, you know, buying a house isn't like buying any house isn't the same as buying the right house.
The right house. Right.
And I think you're absolutely right. Like there's just this mass misconception about property ownership
Right.
because it may not be that you own the home that you live in, right? Maybe you have an investment property somewhere that you own, but where you live is an apartment or a
Yeah.
townhome, that you rent. Like it's on one hand, right, you benefit in home ownership from certain tax write-offs that you get right now from the potential to build equity in that
Right.
property, right? If you invest in the right area at the right time for essentially doing nothing more than maintaining your house and paying your mortgage, you can
You're
grow
good.
significant wealth. Like there is an opportunity to do that, but it's not the only way. I mean,
Right.
certainly. And so I'm with you in that, like, I think affordable housing is not just about providing people with the opportunity to purchase a home, but in ensuring that, or finding some way to align the balance of what the housing options are with what the housing needs are for the community.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at like even even more basic principles of like personal economics is spend less than you earn, right? So if your housing is more than 25% of your income, you've got a lot of problems. Um, Same thing with a car. So there's a lot of things where you know when you look at the broader scope of the problem, especially when it comes to now, let's dig into the racial disparities of economics. Sure, there's redlining, there's predatory loan practice. Yeah, got it. But if more people are able to spend less than they earn, that probably diminishes some of that problem. Um,
So then, I guess because you kind of brought it up, the $15 minimum wage. I mean, because I feel like on one hand, right, providing people with a higher wage would, in theory, allow them to make more money than they're spending. But obviously, that also comes with a caveat that certain things are going to also increase in cost. Now, I think most economists acknowledge, right, that a 5 year gradual increase from the 725 we're at now to 15, essentially wouldn't cripple the economy, nor would it mean that what you're paying for now would cost twice as much, right? Because even right now, at 725 an hour, your McDonald's hamburger, you're not, you know what I like.
yeah, I
So
I don't I don't have a like I don't know where I stand on that argument. I think that my reflex is frustration because I believe that number one, the state minimum wage should probably increase before the federal. I think we're waiting around for the federal government to do something that can be done or instituted at the state level. I understand the complexities there, and then I also get pissed off at the employers. Why are you paying your employees a crap wage? Um, but I know it's a very complex problem. So I'm not saying the $15 minimum wage, that's a question I have.
right,
Like for me, if that's the path that most people feel we should go, or a good majority of people feel we should go, is the federal government to get involved in that. Why is that legislation? Where is it? Where has it been?
right,
Like, where's that been for the last, you know, 10 years where this has been a very, actually 6 years, it's been a heavy part of the conversation.
yeah,
And you can look at even back into the 2016 primaries where people were talking about minimum wage, and obviously nothing's happened then. The Democrats have had the House since 2016 or 2018,
yeah.
uh, and there's no legislation. There's nothing been drafted, nothing that I've seen or that rings a bell that's even been killed in committee.
No, I mean you basically just have Bernie Sanders tweeting and
Right,
shouting about it.
right. And so that's for me. It's like, my question. I'm confused. I mean, I think it's a good solution. I do believe a gradual increase. I don't understand. I don't understand what's been the delay. And I think that the one thing I probably didn't agree with, and I kind of agree with the parliamentarian. I know people are like, oh, we'll just ignore her. We need to start getting the practice of having clean bills.
Yes.
Um,
Well, and look, people got all that. Well, because even though this is something that the majority of people in America want, we're just going to listen to somebody who says we shouldn't do this. Like, when their job is to tell you that what you're doing technically doesn't jive with what the rules are. Yeah. Like, I mean, I I get that there is that. It's like I think it's on one hand, it's like when a college university like fires a coach, right?
right,
Or any organization fires a coach. 9 times out of 10, what you see is a huge swing in the opposite direction. It was a defensive minded coach. Now we need an offensive minded guy. And then
right,
3 years later, they fire the offensive guy, and they're like, now we need a defensive minded guy because our defense was
right.
crap. And it's like, you know, I completely forgot where I was going with that. That's
Well,
how good it was.
here's a just a quick sample. I just googled something. So North Carolina's got a 725 minimum wage in 2020. North Dakota 725. Ohio 870. Oklahoma 725. Those are just four random, and apparently there's more rows. Um, but states can actually make that impact quicker than the federal government.
Well, yeah, I mean, isn't
Alaska,
the California state minimum wage $15?
it's 13.
13, okay.
Yeah, Alaska is 10-19. Arizona 12, Arkansas 10, Colorado 12. Whoa. Am I seeing the right thing? Yeah. Their states are making these changes without the federal government's like intervention.
Yeah.
So my confusion is,
Where
and
has all
hope,
this legislation been?
yeah. So my confusion is not to be. I'm not trying to say people shouldn't make a fair wage, and I want to be very clear in that. I'm just saying, I'm just really stunned that we're waiting around for the federal government to solve that problem. And I think business owners should actually, if we're going to be a democracy that's kind of fueled by a free market system, then it needs to be holistic, and it needs to, make sure that we're really taking care of people. So we're not having these, latent discussions as the game's playing. It's just really weird. We're not United Airlines where the engines fall off the plane, or we're trying to change them like in flight. That's ridiculous.
Okay, so I remembered where I was going with my college coach analogy earlier.
Okay.
Basically, what it seems like now is you have a lot of people, I won't even say Democrats, but that are, on the left, we'll call it,
Mhm.
that are pissed off because over the last 4 years, and even longer than that, they feel like people like Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump and these other Republican leaders have flaunted the rules and gotten away with it. And so now it's like, well, F the rules, right? If nobody's going to make them play by the rules, then we're not going to play by the rules either. And then,
Right.
The actual elected Democratic officials are like, yeah, guys, like we on this side actually think that rules are kind of important. And when the parliamentarian says, hey, technically you can't pass this as part of this budget bill because it doesn't jive with these rules that are set, that Democrats don't go, hang the parliamentarian, right? Like this is not, and this is again where I just, I wonder, can the left keep from eating itself alive while the GOP is in complete disarray? I mean, Josh
No.
Hawley sold his soul for 0% at CPAC.
Yeah. Dude, the answer is no. And I've been saying this for a while. They're going to struggle with that urge to, like, the progressive movement in and of itself is the actual opposite of the extreme right movement.
Sure.
It's just the polar opposite, where you have a loud part of a group being, considered as being the voice of everybody else. And I don't think they're going to be able to do it. I just don't.
I'm with you.
There's a gap in just understanding what the end goal is. It's, let's try to figure out how do we restabilize things without eating ourselves apart, or eating ourselves up. It's ridiculous. I don't have a dog in that fight, because I really want to see that people are able to, I want the country to reset. I don't want to pick a side in that. Even with all the crazy stuff coming from the right, I still don't want to say F your emotions.
Right. I mean, that's the whole thing. Like, that's where I'm with you on that, because ultimately I just think, like, as infuriating as it can be at times to take the
Right.
high road, like, you can't start hitting below the belt because then literally, like, you have no room to argue.
Yeah,
Like,
you're
you've
done.
lost, and that's, it's like people complaining about, going back now and complaining about Al Franken, right? Resigning and being like, what was he thinking? Republicans are never going to resign over something like that. And it's like, yeah, okay. Is that where we're at? That we want our politicians to just be as dirty as the other guys? Like, that's where I just think so much is lost in this stupid feud. It's the Hatfields and the McCoys, right? Like, it doesn't matter what the other side says. Whatever it is that they say is wrong. You know, like you can't like an elected Republican official, because then you're the devil. Like,
Well, I think that you have the Kissingers, and I hope I said his name right. And they're the people that are kind of trying to weather the storm. I think that, and I also know that the party of just blocking everything was the Republicans. They started that, and they feel like that's going to keep them where they want to be. And I keep seeing, like, I guess 23 states are probably the same 23 states we were talking about last time. There are 43 states, and probably 23 of them are the ones that are going to be the problem, that are writing legislation to suppress votes. I think that when it comes to what we're really talking about, it's a question of like morality and ethics. And it's not a question of policy. It's how long can I like just ignore any character moment? How long can I just be immoral? Immoral doesn't have to do with like some scandal, but it could be just doing the wrong thing.
yeah.
And for the party of, we are the the moral party, to act this way is ridiculous. For the party of like what I see as humanity, the Democrats, to act that way is just ridiculous. And it's just it becomes more of an ethics question than a political question in my mind.
Well, and unfortunately, ethics is not a required course in the American public education system.
That's probably very it's probably a good reason for that.
Is it though? Is it a good reason, or I mean, I understand there might be a reason. I just don't think it's very good.
Yeah, you'd be questioning everything. It's like,
So,
yeah,
speaking of questioning everything, one of the things that I had wanted to talk about tonight was, and we almost got into it earlier, and then we kind of veered into politics for a minute. So I hope you don't mind me steering us back just a little bit. But
no, I don't mind at all.
So, like this whole, we've talked about it before, but it was something that came up recently. The idea behind like ethics in marketing, right? And what role marketers themselves or organizations have to, ethically and accurately market their products. And the reason that this came up specifically is that as a podcast, right, things that are incredibly valuable to us are listeners, followers, and probably most importantly, ratings and reviews, right? On the different apps and services, if you leave a rate and, if you rate us and review us, then if it's positive, we're more likely to get new listeners because they're going to show our stuff to more people, which is awesome. People like me and Andre, I'd like to think, are trying to go about that very organically and saying like, hey, if you're listening to the podcast right now, please rate us and review us wherever you are. Like, so seriously, if you're listening to the podcast right now, please rate us and review us. But the reason that I bring this up is that there was another podcast that I listen to regularly, and they recently introduced a segment, or I guess it's because they do like daily shows, which I can't even imagine. I feel bad for their editor. But so they do daily shows. Once a week, they'll do this mailbag thing, right? Where they basically take questions from the audience, and they have a significantly larger audience than we do. They are put on by one of the major networks. I won't say which one. I don't know why, because it's not like anything bad is going to happen. But basically what they're doing is, in order to collect questions for their mailbag, they are telling their listeners to go leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And in that review, leave their question, and they'll read through all of the 5-star reviews that they get and basically assemble the questions and try to get to them as best they can. And so, like, on one hand, my first thought was, well, that's really smart. You're going to generate a shit ton of 5-star reviews, and just so that people can get their questions up there, right? Okay, cool. And then that immediately struck me as, wow, that's like the shadiest thing that you could do to try and game the system. And like, I'll be honest, right? Part of me, I think, is sitting here going, if it was a small podcast gaming the system that way, I'd be all for it. But because this is one of the big boy, American
full-time
News
channel.
Network. No, it's not. It's not OAN. I promise I would never listen to that. But yeah, because it's put on by one of them, it's like, well, you guys have enough audience already. Like what? But obviously, at the same time, I understand that the guys who do this show aren't the board of executives or whatever, board of directors, and so they're not reaping all of the benefits of this. But I do feel like it's kind of. It just really made me wonder, like, man, at what point do we, like, if you're Apple Podcasts, right? And you hear this, wouldn't you be like, hey, guys, no.
Well, I don't know. I was talking to somebody a few weeks ago about, so two things. One, I think it's shady. It is definitely, it's very blatantly gaming the system. Right, it's an algorithm, and that's the end of the story. Like now we're gaming. Now you're going to make it harder for the next person to come up with some ingenious marketing idea because of what you're now shutting off. And you don't have rules, and you don't have like safeguards until somebody pushes the safeguards or they go off the rails. So there you have it. So whoever this podcast is, blah, thank you. Secondly, I was talking to somebody a few weeks ago about podcasting. I'm like, well, they brought up the Rogan podcast or some, yeah. And I was like, I don't hate him. I just think that he had an audience before he started podcasting. It wasn't like he started like from ground zero.
Yeah.
So yes, although it's amazing that he's able to get these sponsorship deals, it wasn't like it was never going to happen. Right. So they're two leagues, and it's no different than the recording industry or like movies, where you have the big labels. They have the money, the resources, the time, effort, and energy to promote their stuff. I'd rather do it independent. Sure, if we get sponsors someday, that's awesome, but we did all the hard work, but they're not telling us which direction to go. That takes us away from our mission. So I think ethically it's probably a gray area. I think the impact is going to be seen for others, and it's going to be a negative impact. And I'm just not, I'm not down with that. I think it's wrong. I think for that reason, it's wrong. And I think that the big players, I mean, while they have the ball, or they don't have the ball really, I think it's just a matter of the independent podcasters and independent, even musicians and whoever else, filmmakers. It's just, we can look in awe of the quote unquote success they have, but how long will it last? They'll be off to the next gimmick in 6 months.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, I think you've seen, especially in music, I think you've seen a big rise in the number of independent artists that have become kind of globally famous, right? The SoundCloud rapper, era.
Right.
I don't know if you watched any of the 6ix9ine documentary that they had on YouTube or something for a little while. I couldn't help myself. I mean, one of our former coworkers used to talk about Tekashi 6ix9ine all the time, and that was the only reason I knew who this person was. Is the only reason I ever would have found out who that person was. But there was an element of it that when the whole thing broke that, he was turning and ratting on, gang members and stuff like that, it was like, oh, this is kind of interesting now. Like, I didn't really give a shit before, but now I'm kind of like, this dude's going to get fucking murdered. And then he's like, no, I don't want witness protection. I'm going to get back into the rap game. And I mean, apparently his first album since coming back has totally flopped. Like, I think everybody has moved on, right? Because it's, that flash in the pan. And I mean, ultimately, I think because of the whole image that he was trying to really build, that deciding to rat on a bunch of legitimate gang members really
doesn't go over very well.
Yeah. Like even people who aren't really like gang affiliated are still like, dude, I mean, snitches get stitches. Good. Like we all know that. I tell my kid that. Like,
yeah, I mean, I don't know how I feel about that. It's like, look, man, do your hustle, right? Everybody's entitled to grind, and do your best to be the best you can be. Shortcuts, they're shortcuts for a reason, they catch up to you, right?
See, and I guess like that's where I'm hopeful that, you know, if say if Apple Podcasts is who they're targeting, right? And they find out and they're like, yeah, that's really not cool and not what we're, trying to do here. That it's not just, all right, we're shutting down, this type of review engagement sort of thing,
Right.
right? Or we're going to moderate every single review before it gets published. Because, oh,
Yeah, God help you with that one, right?
right. But,
There
putting
should
in
be
place
something
some
that,
sort of safeguards and then like, hey, guess what? We're banning you from Apple Podcasts for a month.
right.
Like you guys, you want to publish your stuff elsewhere, fine. But you took advantage of our platform in a way that you knew was ultimately deceitful and was going to game the system. And we've decided that we're now whether or not, look, the
But
people
think
who
about it.
back
These
this little
guys-
podcast,
Yeah, that's what I'm
probably,
saying.
right?
Think about it. They've got the cash to put into that.
Then
And,
everybody's zip flopping onto the table and it's like, ugh.
yeah, so
Sausage party.
I mean, they got the cash to put into that, and they're gonna. I mean, like, I'm not gonna sit here and be a hater on that. But I am gonna say, like, think about what that could potentially do to somebody in the future, and you got to be okay with like what your actions or what you're doing right now, how it may negatively impact. Because I can tell you, as a developer, I'll be straight up with you. The minute I see that being a problem, I'm like, yeah, I need to check that out. Like, I literally was looking at some of my own logs and statistics the other day, and I was like, yeah, that could potentially be a problem. So I'm circling back and putting some safeguards in my code, um, because it's just the way it is. Like, when you start playing with somebody's baby, and let's say Apple Podcasts is their baby,
Yeah.
they want it to work fair for every user, not just for the ones that are trying to find the shortcut. So
Yeah.
that's how I look at it, and I think it will definitely negatively impact people in the future. So
I mean, I'll be honest, like it's kind of had me wondering whether or not I want to continue listening to the podcast.
yeah,
Like at this point, I'm kind of like, I mean, I don't listen enough, and they do like live YouTube streams and stuff like that, so you can get
right,
involved, in that regard. But I've always been like, nah, I'm not that interested. It's like when I've already listened to all of the Bomani Jones podcasts that I can stand for a while, and I need to hear somebody else's voice. This is the one that, or in between episodes as I'm waiting.
that's how I think that's how people listen to podcasts. That's what I do. Like, I've kind of been listening to, or my white noise has been like SNL on YouTube. And I've been like laughing and not working. But I mean,
So much for white noise.
yeah. But I'll tell you this, I didn't realize how funny Bill Hader was or Kristen Wiig until I started watching like old clips. I'm like, gosh, they're funny. And on Keenan, they're freaking hilarious.
Have you watched any of Keenan's new show?
Not yet.
Me
Like,
neither. It's on my list, but
yeah.
how
like
about Young Rock?
Nah, I'm not watching that.
Oh, okay.
Nope.
I'm just telling you, I've watched the first 2 episodes. It's it's so funny. And the reason it's funny, primarily in my opinion, so you know the whole premise behind it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Randall Park is the guy that's playing like the interviewer, and he's
Right.
always doing the interview. And so their interactions are what sell this whole show for me.
Really?
Like those little moments. The rest of it is good. Like I think they actually did a really good job. Like the guy that they got to play him as a teenager looks just like him. Like
Wow.
as I imagine he looked as a teenager.
Right.
And then like the guy that they got to play his dad is great. The whole way that he talks about his dad and the portrayal of his dad I find really interesting, because it's like, on one hand, his dad was in his eyes was this hero.
Larger than life, yeah.
But on the other hand, like his dad made decisions in their lives that made things significantly harder for them, and also went out of his way to kind of oversell what it was that he was doing in that moment, or, like that sort of thing. And so it's interesting to see that, obviously from his perspective and kind of how he allows them to portray his dad, who he obviously cares a lot about, but still wanting to be somewhat honest in at least his, version of how he kind of perceived things at the time. So,
And it's not that I don't want to watch those two shows. It's just that like I've been super busy. And it's like if I invest in another show, I'm probably going to lose like 45 minutes here or there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I just can't afford to do that right now. So
I mean,
hopefully
that's fair.
Like I did catch up on WandaVision. Like actually not catch up. I've been watching it like early Friday morning. And I'll tell you what, the last two episodes made me really enjoy the show. Like I didn't like the pace of it at first. I was like, oh, this is boring. I really don't care. None of this is boring. I mean, none of this is interesting to me.
Yeah.
The last two episodes, I'm like, I could have just started here and I would have
you would have been fine. Yeah. And like my Twitter feed has just been filled with WandaVision, like comments and stuff. And fortunately, no spoilers because I don't follow people that post spoilers. But I don't know. Like, I love Paul Bettany.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really care for the non-twin Olsen.
The not twin.
Yeah, she's the not twin.
I like her more than the twins, but that's all another topic.
I mean, I guess I don't love the twins either. The whole Full House thing.
Yeah.
But anyways, I digress. Yeah, I don't know. Like I was really excited for WandaVision when I first saw the trailers, and then it came out, and it wasn't even that I was like, well, no, I don't want to watch it. But it just hasn't been at the top of my like, man, I've really got to get around to watching WandaVision list. And
it's the audience they're looking for. Like I'm the ideal audience, but they almost lost me, but I hung on because I know that all these stories are interwoven.
So are you saying that I am not the target audience?
You're not. I think that show is for the comic book kids. Like I really think that that one's kind of like the House of M was a great storyline. And I don't think they're doing a lot to kind of catch people up to speed with the source material, if I'm being honest. Like for me, that's why it was kind of boring at the same time, because I'm expecting to see other things happen.
Okay. I mean, I guess that makes sense from a comic book fan's standpoint,
Yeah. And the pace of the show has not been great. And on top of that, there's been way too many Easter eggs. So you literally spend like a week like making up theories in your head of like, oh, what are they going to do? How are they going to do this? And it's just...
Does any of it pay off ultimately, or...
kind of. It's like there's some good paybacks. I mean, so it's like, well, okay, I get it. But I'm telling you, the last two episodes have been like, all right, now I can rock with this show. Because it just didn't make... It makes sense. The writers did a really good job. I think I had unrealistic expectations at some point in the series. Like I thought it was going too slow.
Yeah. And that has been the primary critique that I have heard, is people kind of feeling like it's a little slow. And then same thing, like the last couple of weeks, the opinion is like, wow, holy cow, these new episodes are like, I can't believe they just did that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'm sure that I will tune in at some point. It just has not been, for whatever reason, has not made it towards the top of my list so far. You know what I did watch the other day? Speaking of comic books, Polar.
Oh, is that good?
Oh, man. Like...
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so Mads Mikkelsen, right? And he's the sniper. He's an assassin. Yeah. Basically, the story is that this assassin or hitman company forces people into retirement at age 50. But they get this big, the company matches basically all of the money that they've saved away at this point.
Right.
And so in order to recoup this money, before they retire, they're mysteriously getting killed off. I'm sure most people can put two and two together to figure out who it is that's doing that, but it's based on a graphic novel series, a Dark Horse graphic novel series. And the whole, it has a very, as we were watching it, Christy was like, is this a European film? This feels more like a European film than like your traditional American action movie. And
Right.
sure enough, like the director, I think is Dutch, or Norwegian or something like that. And so it certainly has that
That
flavor
feel.
to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like things are much more methodical in the way that they build. There's a lot of kind of downtime, but the tension, I feel like, paid off so well in that movie. Like, just was really well done.
I watched the second Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I've
Yeah,
been trying to find the first one. I haven't found it yet. But that's kind of like I passed on the first one. I just wasn't really into it. And I watched the second one. I was like, this is a really good movie. Um, and I think European directors have a flair of storytelling that it's kind of lost. Like I know that people like to say that what is his name? James Gunn,
yeah.
is that type of director. I don't see it.
No, I
Um,
mean, look, I like James Gunn and the work that he's done with like the Guardians of the Galaxy series and some of that
eh,
stuff. Like, I mean, I think he's done okay. Like, I'm not, but no, I would not ascribe that type of storytelling to him. Like, I think it's really difficult in a lot of ways for whatever reason. I think a lot of it is because of the demand for money. Like I feel like
right.
the American film industry is so dollar driven that decisions get made that ultimately are made at like the executive level, and it's like
Yeah,
those people should not have a hand in what and who's acting in this or what scenes are
yeah.
getting cut, sort of deal.
I think Matt Reeves, the Batman, is going to be probably in that same category of like just good because it's a fresh eye and like the trailers look amazing. And let me be careful because normally when I see a lot of trailers, the movie sucks,
Yeah.
or or I'm just underwhelmed. I'm like, oh, that was a waste of $12. Um, the trailers for the Batman look like there was a lot of thought put into the story and the overall direction of the movie. So I'm excited to see that. And I'm on the fence about the Snyder cut of the Justice League because I don't know Jack Snyder,
Zach.
Zach, whatever. I just think I don't care that much. I want to see it because again, I'm probably going to watch any comic book movie you put out there. Uh, I just don't think that he has a good eye for the comic genre.
Yeah, I mean, did you like any of the
No,
Superman movies that he did?
no,
Superman versus Batman?
no, that was awful.
Yeah, I mean, like, so it was funny because the other
I,
night
I called him Jack.
you did. I shouldn't have corrected you. Um, what was it? We were doing something. I think it was after we watched Polar. Like we put on. It was like an hour of movie trailers.
Right.
You
Oh
know,
yeah, I
and
watch those on YouTube all the time.
yeah, and I got okay. So I'll finish up this thought before I diverge into what I'm sure is going to be a total thing that we did not plan to talk about on this podcast. But there was the trailer for the Zack Snyder cut, and I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm like, "What is this?" And then I'm like, didn't this movie already come out? Like, I thought Ben Affleck was done being Batman, like,
Right.
and then it's the Snyder cut, and I'm like, they have a trailer just for his cut. And
They
I
cut
know
out
that people made a huge deal about it when the movie came out that, oh, they cut all this out of the movie. I hate to tell you, but unless you were just a huge DC movie comic verse nerd, you're not going to like this any better. Like, it's just not.
I would disagree from the trailers. I kid you
Okay.
not. I think that the things that were cut out from what I've read make the movie make more sense
I mean,
because they're
I'm not.
so that's where I would argue. So
I
maybe
never
he
saw
was
the movie in the first place because
okay.
I've never been. Zack Snyder is not really like my type of movie director. I haven't generally enjoyed or found his movies to be that it's just not my aesthetic. Like,
I'll tell you what, ever since I started working with you, like I used to not care about the director of the movie. I just care if the movie was good or not. And like now I'm like, I
but
gotta up my director game, man. Like I'm like, oh, all right, so this guy's got like a freaking portfolio of movies that I've not watched, and he links them all. I think you have a board in your room with like directors and strings. So,
Yeah, but I hide it over here on the wall. You can't see.
oh, I'm like, how does he know all that crap, man?
No, I
So,
mean, so I think we've talked about it before a little bit, but I've just been a huge nerd when it comes to pop culture stuff. Like my
right.
parents raised me on The Simpsons since I was like 7 years old. It was our Thursday night tradition. We would always like power through dinner so we could sit down and watch it together. Then when it moved to Sundays, we were like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And we're like, well, we're going to watch it on Sunday nights. But yeah, and that started it though, because The Simpsons had so many pop culture references that they made themselves that it's like even things that occurred prior to my generation or like that occurred not while I was necessarily like, old enough to really remember and experience it because Simpsons made a reference to it.
You go research it.
Right. Or just, it was like over time I started to understand what that reference ultimately meant, but
so
because
you'd be sitting somewhere and just start laughing hysterically.
Yeah. Okay. So what this ultimately led to was that in high school, my friends and I say my friends, the former band members and I would go to like McDonald's or Taco Bell, and while we're standing there in line waiting to get our food, we would play this game, which is basically the 7 Steps to Kevin Bacon. Yeah. Right? Where you'd start anywhere and by naming movies and actors that were in them and then subsequent movies that they were in with other actors, you can get to Kevin Bacon. Well, we would play this game without an end. Like just to see if we could keep naming another actor in that movie and then another movie that actor was in. And it would just go around the circle. And so that was a big part of it was that like it was required knowledge to, like win this game at any point, even though there wasn't really a winner, but it was basically like if you could name a movie that the person after you could not name an actor in or vice versa, but the key is you had to be able to answer that question too. It couldn't be like, well, I have no idea who else is in that movie because then there's no way for you to back it up.
I did different things.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, that's some white people shit right there. I'm well aware. But yeah, like ultimately it just led me to this, I guess, like...
No, but I'll tell you what, there's an appreciation. Like I can say, honestly, Christopher Nolan is one of my favorite directors.
Yeah.
Right? Because he did a great job with his Batman trilogy.
Memento.
And yeah, that's another. There's a lot of things.
That's another of his movies. Yes, Chris. Thank you.
I said yes.
And I know. I was
trying to move on.
I know you were. I'm just playing the game.
Yeah, I know. I was like, yeah, okay, cool. Like we're not gonna do this.
Guy Pearce, Iron Man 3, Robert Downey Jr.
All right, we're not doing this because
Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, Val Kilmer, Top Gun, Tom Cruise.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, that's probably fun for
Mission Impossible. Ving Rhames.
It's Long Green Mile.
He wasn't in that.
Who was it?
That was Michael Clark Duncan.
I would suck. Now you've ruined my trip to McDonald's. What was I saying?
I don't know. Christopher Nolan.
Yeah, he's a great director.
You have an appreciation for directors now.
Yeah.
And it is, look, it's one of those things. I noticed this like a year or two ago where there are almost all of the shows that I really love, the shows that I will watch on repeat for years, have apparently like are very interconnected in terms of the people who have worked on them. So, Michael Dotrieve, I think it is, worked on King of the Hill. He's worked on Bob's Burgers. Like, it's one of those things where it's just like, I keep seeing these names show up in the credits over and over again. And over time, you start to recognize it and you're like, holy crap, this person has literally been involved in like The Office, Greg Daniels, right? Like he's one of those guys, Parks and Rec. Like you name a great NBC comedy, Greg Daniels has essentially written it. Worked on King of the Hill, by the way. Like Mike Judge came up with the characters and Greg Daniels literally was like, this is the story we're going to tell.
So you're the demographic, right? So you're basically like, think about it. Marketers spend time and writers, well, I don't know if writers do the same thing, but they may have a certain style, but the producers are gonna be like, well, so how do we get this team together? What's our demo? What time slot are we trying to fill? And they've got you, like pinned down. Um,
Yeah, in a lot of
that's
cases.
that's where like you look at the content on HBO Max and Disney, like that's where it's the same thing, So you're gonna find those like differences of like, which audience you're not the target audience, obviously for WandaVision. You'll eventually watch it
Yeah.
because you will, right? You'll watch it
Right,
before
because
you
I've invested as much into the Marvel universe as I have already.
right. But I'm gonna sit there and be like, well, I'm gonna power through this show. Like I didn't like The Mandalorian. Like there's nothing that anybody can say that makes me say that's a fantastic Star Wars story.
But didn't you
And there,
like love the last 2 episodes of the last season or something?
uh I think it kind of got to a point. That's all I could say. I was like, all right. And it was okay. Like there was more action but it's like this, the story doesn't like, I'm not impressed. I don't want that story basically. Like I'm not the demo for that show. I'm going to watch it because I'm a sci-fi person, but I'm not going to really be like, I'm going to watch it again. I might watch WandaVision again to see if there's things I missed. That's all I'm saying.
No, I mean that makes sense. Like I hear you on that. I will say I am 100% the demographic for the new Ghostbusters movie.
Oh, I'm watching that. That looks dope.
Like we were sitting there, we're watching all these trailers, right? And all of a sudden that one comes on, and it's like it's not super obvious that it's Ghostbusters at first, but then the moment that like the green gas escapes from the pit, I was like, holy shit. And Christy's like, what? Like she thought something was wrong. And I'm like, oh my God, oh my God. And I'm like pounding the bed because I'm so excited. And she
Feel
was
like
like,
a 4-year-old.
do you know what this is? And she was like, no. And I'm like, it's the new Ghostbusters. Like, yeah, seriously, like a fucking 4-year-old. And I was just giddy. Like, look at that, look at that. Like,
I watch trailers on YouTube like way too like that's white noise, and if I hear like part of the trailer that sounds interesting, I'll actually watch the whole trailer.
Yeah.
Which it's kind of fun because it kind of says, okay, this movie might be good and blah blah blah. Like I watched Monster Hunter. I don't recommend anybody. Actually, it's based on the video game. I've never played the video game. Not a good story at all. If you don't know the video game. Like I was like, everybody should be dead right now. Right now.
That's true of most movies.
Oh man. But anyway, so yeah, I'm seeing that the Knicks are doing really well.
It's probably because they got rid of Dennis Smith Jr.
That's probably factual.
I don't know if you saw, but he had one hell of a dunk the other night for Detroit. I know, like, you don't watch the Pistons because nobody watches the Pistons.
Why
But
would I do that?
yeah, that was like, the question is asked, I think, fairly often of NC State fans, where it's like, was the 1 year of Dennis Smith Jr. worth all of the potential NCAA trouble because of the whole like Adidas investigation that the FBI was doing that he is mentioned in and supposedly associated with? And for the most part, the answer is no, because they didn't even make the tournament that year. And they were terrible at the end of it. Mark Gottfried got fired. So on the other hand, it's kind of like, I love it. Got Mark Gottfried fired. He is probably one of the hardest dunkers. Like he is just angry at the rim for some reason. I don't know what the rim said or did, but that dude just wants to break a backboard. Like it just seems like that's his deal. And I wish that the rest of his game rounded out so that he could be a more popular star, because I think like some of those moments are really freaking cool to watch, but he's got so many plays in between where it's like, ugh.
I think that like with the NBA, I'm trying to, this is the worst time for me right now. Like I have a deadline at the end of this month, and it's like, so my personal time is kind of getting slimmed down. But I am very interested to see what happens this season. I think the playoffs are going to be a lot different. And I'm kind of getting the feeling that the Lakers are going to win again. If I'm being super honest.
Yeah. I mean, like I feel like it's kind of one of those. Who else has made moves to be better than them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could argue Brooklyn if you think that Kyrie, Kevin Durant, and James Harden can figure out how to win a playoff series. Like that's where I'm with you. That I just think ultimately. I mean, to some degree, it's kind of like it's just like LeBron's been there and done it so much. Why would you bet against anybody else at this point?
You don't. And I think even though Harden had a triple double again, and like I think he's an amazing player. I'm just
Yeah.
like I just don't see the formulas, and I think the Knicks can have a really strong season. I just feel like the Lakers are going to win again. That's my gut's like, and back to the West Coast for that ring.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to pay attention to the trades. I just don't care. Like I just don't care. I think that the NBA is missing something right now, and it has nothing to do with COVID. It's just that the gameplay is not, and this is just my opinion, it's not as exciting. I tried to watch a couple games last week and I just got bored. And it could be, actually, I think it might be partially COVID. It doesn't feel like it's the same for me.
Yeah, I will say that I agree that I think the for whatever reason the indoor sports it seems like we miss the crowd more than
Yeah.
like in football. Even
In
in the
football, you rarely see the crowd. It's
yeah,
fun being.
I mean you're not wrong. And I think that is part of it. It just because I feel like in basketball and in hockey, like those momentum swings are so quick,
Yeah.
like everything happens. So bam, bam, bam. There's not the downtime in between plays like there is in football
Right.
that the crowd energy provides so much of the atmosphere, right? And there's
Right.
an element of that in football too, but I just don't think that you recognize the absence of it as much. And so, yeah, like even watching a little bit, like I've barely watched any college basketball this year. First
I
off,
watched.
because I can't if I'm NC State, like if it's an NC State game, I can't watch it. And second, because it's just like the little bit that I have watched, it's like watching a preseason exhibition game, or like a
Yeah.
game in the Bahamas where like it's a 3 a.m. tip off.
Yeah.
It's like there's nobody there, there's no energy. It just feels very cavernous, because of like the echoes and everything. And
I mean, Carolina's having a good season, and it's. I don't know. I'm just on the fence again about sports, and I hope that we get things kind of back to normal because my plans have all been screwed up with sports again. But I think that I'm glad to see Carolina's having a good season, except for the loss to Syracuse. I'm glad to see the Knicks are doing pretty well. I don't know how long they can keep that up, but it seems like they put a lot of good pieces in play. I think they have a playoff like destination, and that's about it. But I do think the Lakers are going to win. So that's where
yeah,
I'm at with sports.
I'll,
And I've been
I'll
trying to watch baseball, but man, I got so much stuff to do. I'm priorities. I guess that's what it boils down to. Priorities.
I don't know. Like at this point, I don't watch a ton of sports. But
Right.
if you asked me to pick up a new sport that I was gonna watch, which would basically be baseball or hockey, I would take hockey all day long. And I'm sorry, I know you're a big baseball fan.
Yeah.
I just cannot get into baseball. I don't know if it was just like my experience playing baseball growing up or
Right.
what, but I've just like I love going to a game in person. I'll go like
Yeah.
the Durham Bulls game or something like that. I love it. It's fun. You're in person. It's more about the atmosphere and the excitement and sharing it with friends and whatnot than it is anything
Yeah.
else. But I mean, I don't think you could pay me to watch a baseball game on TV. Like, you'd be hard pressed.
Yeah, and I guess it goes down. You're right. It's probably your taste or your experience with the sport. Like I enjoy baseball, and I know that some people just don't like it, but um, okay.
Yeah,
I mean, I like. It's like we're both sports guys. It's kind of like, and I think I've watched hockey games. I watched them live. I try to watch them on television. They've got a long season. Also, it's like, gosh, I
They
can't.
do.
I don't have to watch every game.
I think, and that's like hockey, the NBA, and baseball. That's my three biggest. It's the one complaint I have with all three of them is it's like you
Right.
got too many freaking games. You can't really expect me to be engaged for every single game that the team that I'm going to follow plays.
Yeah.
And that's where you're never really going to get them to drop the number of games because of the television dollars and the
Right.
ticket revenue. And it's the
Right.
same thing in the NFL. Like they're only going to look at adding more games, and eventually they will add more games simply because they're going to want more money.
Right.
And they will continue to add more games until they can't make more money off of it, is essentially what it's going to boil down to.
Yeah. Sports. I love sports.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say it's just been really hard to be invested 100% with COVID.
It has been. I agree. I've been trying to I think I've been more invested in the NFL off season, if only because of these ridiculous Russell Wilson rumors / statements / petulant childing, I guess, is what it kind of seems like to me on one hand.
He's not going anywhere.
I mean, he's not. There's absolutely no way that he's leaving Seattle.
He can go to Denver.
Well, so that's what I was going to ask. Would you take Russell Wilson over Drew Lock?
Yeah.
Okay. So you would trade.
That's 5 seasons of good, a good QB.
Okay. But you wouldn't take Deshaun Watson.
No.
So you still haven't changed your opinion on that.
No.
So you think Russell Wilson is that much better than Deshaun Watson?
And I think as far as experience goes, he would adapt quicker.
I can see that. I mean, I think he has proven that so far in his career.
Yeah. And this is not a dig on Deshaun.
No, okay? I know.
It's just I can more than likely get to the playoffs. There's an 80% chance that the Broncos go to the playoffs with Drew Lock next season. If you bring in a Russell Wilson, there is a 95% chance, 97% chance they go to the playoffs.
I think he's missed the playoffs once since he's been in the league.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So, and this is just I think Denver needs consistency. I don't think they need to try to reinvest in a QB right now. I think that would be a bad play.
So as much as you would take Russell Wilson over Drew Lock, you don't think that that's what the Broncos should do right now?
I do not.
Yeah,
because I think Drew Lock, long term, is at least 7-10 years. In my opinion, I think
before he is good.
No, he was pretty close to being good this year.
I'm just.
I think he's 7 to 10 years of consistency.
Okay.
They're going to start to run into salary cap problems with a lot of their franchise tag players. They're if they don't mess up with the receivers, they're in good shape. I think Philip Lindsay should get more starts than Melvin Gordon next year. And I know that part of that was injuries, but I also remember that there was a lot of times early in the season that Gordon was starting. I didn't necessarily agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you on that. I watched Melvin Gordon as a quote unquote workhorse, running back in San Diego / LA under Anthony Lynn. And while he was a good running back, he had his limitations ultimately. Yeah. And I think that Philip Lindsay showed more variety in his ability and more consistency ultimately in what he was able to do.
He dropped a few balls, and that's okay. And that's been an issue I've had with him. All right, dude, you gotta hold those in the catch. I mean, you're not trying to, catch and then run straight out all the time. You got to hold the ball and just take the hit. But I do think Philip Lindsay, and it's not a dig on Melvin. It's just that, dude, it's not your spot.
Yeah.
And LA / San Diego had a different run game than Denver.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because Denver always employs that run blocking scheme, don't they?
Yeah.
It's just so weird that the organization is we don't care who the coach is, what the offensive scheme is. Our offensive line will always use zone blocking. I've never understood how that's a thing, but
but it works for some reason. And
It does in certain situations and with the right players. You're absolutely right. I mean, I think Tom Cable, who was the offensive line coach for the Seattle Seahawks for a while there, also employed the zone blocking scheme to the detriment and madness of many a Seahawks fan, because they were just like, why would you create this ridiculously complicated system instead of just having something that your guys can actually understand? Because
it matters with the speed. You look at Terrell Davis, you look at a I'll be honest, I don't think the Seahawks have ever had a fast running back. They've had good running backs. I don't think fast is in that description.
I would say you're probably, I mean, consistently, yes, you're right.
Right.
Absolutely.
I would say that, and this is why I'm kind of cautious about saying anything about Melvin Gordon, because he is fast.
Mm-hmm.
He's fast and strong, but there's something that's off about his game.
Yep.
And I can't really place it, but it's like there's something off.
Even when he was at his best with the Chargers, there was something to me that said this guy is not a long-term running back solution, right? He wasn't the first round pick that you spent on him ultimately.
Right.
And I get, I don't know. I understand to a certain extent why they picked him. They drafted Ryan Matthews to replace LaDainian Tomlinson. He never was going to be that. That was stupid to do that, to say we have to go find our star running back because LaDainian Tomlinson, we let him go. And that was all AJ Smith, who I can't stand.
And that was a stupid decision.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like I was watching some Tyreek Hill tapes, and he's dangerous. He's like ridiculously dangerous. I didn't realize until I started watching tapes. I'm like, yo, he should never be able to touch the ball.
I mean, it was him and Travis Kelce that were getting double teamed on almost every single offensive snap in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Because that's about the only way that you can really slow him down, is to bracket him.
And you're not even slowing him down. You're just agitating him.
I mean, you're hoping that you're like, I'm going to just literally tell everybody on the team, go defend Tyreek Hill and let the other players go make plays.
Yeah. It's like, wow, he's dangerous. And I really, I gained a new appreciation for Kelce. I was like, I even had to apologize to him publicly because I feel bad because he's really good. So Mr. Kelce, if you're listening, hats off to you, man. Like, you're dope.
I've been sitting here thinking, like, with this whole Russell Wilson thing, where would I like to see him end up? Because I'm not a Seahawks fan, I'm a Seahawks fan because Russell Wilson is there. Just like I was a Chargers fan because Phillip Rivers was there. And the moment he was gone, I burned I still have my jerseys. But it's like I've been sitting here thinking, do I want him to stay in Seattle? Or is there somewhere else that I think could be a good fit? I really don't like the idea of him going to New Orleans because I feel like Sean Payton is a grossly overrated head coach and like this offensive guru with Drew Brees. Like, yeah, Drew Brees is a ridiculously good and accurate quarterback. Maybe. The Raiders, Las Vegas is another place that because John Gruden absolutely loves Russell Wilson and they're not completely sold on Derek Carr. And the thought is that Pete Carroll might look at Derek Carr and say, hand the ball off 50 times a game. That's the theory. That's part of the idea that there's this rift between Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll, is that Pete Carroll's this, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I want to establish the run in 2021 and play good defense. And Russell is like, I want to go win an MVP while also leading our team to the Super Bowl.
Okay, I see that. No, those are two good choices, but I think he fits better in New Orleans.
I feel like New Orleans is probably better positioned as a team.
And he's got better protection in New Orleans than he does in Vegas.
Yeah. The other options that he put out were the Bears, which I really don't understand. That makes no sense to me whatsoever, unless he's like, well, Matt Nagy was the offensive coordinator for Patrick Mahomes, and that's the kind of offense I want to be a part of. But that has been nothing like what they've tried to run in Chicago. Granted, they've tried to run it with Mitch Trubisky and Nick Foles, right? Or not Russell Wilson. So maybe there's something there. The fourth one, I'm trying to remember who it was now, because there were 4 teams: Chicago, New Orleans,
Vegas. The Giants?
No. No, because it was like all places that didn't have quarterbacks, more or less, or like where the quarterback situation was kind of like
Up in the air?
Yeah, I don't remember who the fourth one was. It obviously wasn't anybody that important. I heard the Jets thrown out at one point. I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
He doesn't fit there.
No.
It's kind of like I was reading an article today that Dak Prescott wants like money close enough to Mahomes. I was like, my dude, you got to stay healthy, bro.
Well, he does, but I think, a lot of it is positioning, right? I want Mahomes money, meaning I want you to offer me $10 million less than what Mahomes is making, or $20 million less.
Is he worth it?
I don't know. I mean, look, is he worth it to the Cowboys is what it really comes down to, right? Because they're the ones who are going to give him that money. I don't think anybody else is lining up for the Dak Prescott lottery. Yeah. But look, I think Dak's a good QB. I think he's played better than the second-round draft pick that they took him as. But I don't know that he's shown enough at this point that you invest multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract. The problem is Dallas has now essentially put themselves in the same situation, potentially, that Washington found themselves in with Kirk Cousins, where it's like you're just going to keep franchise tagging this guy every year because you can't come to an agreement because you didn't make the deal when you should have the first time around. If you'd have done the deal last year before the season started, you save yourself $20 million a year probably. Like that's the if you're going to give Dak what Dak wants to sign a long-term deal.
But Dak doesn't have to stay there.
He doesn't, and
he's not.
That's the whole thing is that Dak has the leverage over the Cowboys in my mind.
Because and he's not the same QB as Mahomes.
But it doesn't matter because he is the starter for the Cowboys.
I know. I'm just saying, like I'm just
with
frustrated.
you. He's not. I mean it's it's this whole. It's how the stupid money game gets played in the NFL, right?
I'm not even digging on him because he's a good I struggle to give him his props because he's no different than RG3 to me. Like there's all these breakout quarterbacks. Every single one of them is the same story every season 2, season 3. People find themselves making excuses for them.
What are we going to find about Patrick Mahomes this coming year, right?
Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm not saying that Patrick Mahomes didn't play good last year, but he wasn't the Patrick Mahomes of the year before, right? And dude lost a Super Bowl. He looked really pedestrian in that Super Bowl.
The only thing he's got going for him was he went back for the chance at a Super Bowl. That's the only thing he's got going for him.
Sure. Russell Wilson did the same thing, right? First 3 years. Won a Super Bowl and went back. No, I mean, I'm with you. Like, hasn't been back since, right?
Right.
I mean, hasn't even been to the NFC Championship game since.
That's my frustration. It's like, I get it with the breakout quarterbacks, but I'm so over that.
And on top of that, the fact that... Sorry, I got really quiet there because I realized I was getting very animated. The fact that wins are almost exclusively tied to a quarterback and a coach, right? Like associating wins with a coach, sure, makes sense. You're making all of these kind of like game plan decisions and in-game decisions. And yes, you have quarterbacks who are making in-game decisions. Every player is, but that's just it, is every player is making those decisions, right? Like a quarterback could be the guy that ultimately won you the game, or maybe he's not. Like maybe you won in spite of him, right? But sitting there and saying, well, yeah, I mean, like, because that's one of the stats that gets thrown out about Russell Wilson all the time is like he's the winningest quarterback in the first 4 years, 5 years, 6 seasons, like all this stuff, and it's like, great. What does it really mean, like in terms of his success as a player, right? Like,
right.
And I don't know. I go back and forth because football is very much a team sport. We also track individual stats, right? And like,
here's the problem. You throw that whole theory out the window with Tom Brady. Now, if we're gonna take that same statement and we're gonna make it a blanket statement, which seems to be the norm.
Are we gonna knit or crochet this blanket statement?
We're gonna try to knit it together.
It's a blanket. It's a quilt statement.
But the only person that makes that statement or that theory true is Tom Brady. Now, as you're saying that, I'm thinking, yeah, but when I look at the O-line of the Bucks, there's a lot of people that got they probably got on that team kind of cheap, but they're good players.
Yeah. I mean, their center, Ted Larson.
Yeah.
Former NC State player, by the way.
I know that. I was
You were waiting. You've been waiting since the Super Bowl for me to point it out.
So
NC State wins another Super Bowl.
But you see my point? Like you could probably make that you could make that argument with Tom Brady any day. But then you also have to acknowledge the fact that the Bucks team was designed to win a Super Bowl.
I mean, as were a lot of those Patriots teams, right? Like,
yeah,
a lot of it, I mean, at times it was Tom taking a little bit less money, right? Peyton Manning used to do the same thing. A lot of the really good quarterbacks, especially as they get along in their age, are like, yeah, I mean, if they've done right and invested their money over time, they're not living off of their paychecks, right?
Right.
And so ultimately what that allows them to do is say, okay, I'll take a little bit less money because it doesn't matter as much to me now so that you can pay other players on the team, right? This whole JJ Watt going to Arizona.
$31 million.
What?
2 years, $31 million. When I saw that, I was like, did somebody fall down the stairs and just agree to that?
So you're going to hate me for this. The general manager in Arizona, Steve Keim, former NC State graduate,
doesn't own a calculator.
Yeah, apparently. Has not been great at drafting players over the years, but I don't know. I mean, it wasn't the team I expected him to go to. I think the connection with DeAndre Hopkins makes a little bit of sense because I think they had a good relationship.
He's close to home.
It's close to home. That's where I think a lot of people were confused, right? Because there was this, it's the same thing they do all the time in sports where it's, so-and-so's hometown has a team. That must be where he wants to go play. How do you know that? If that team really freaking sucks or they're not going to pay him any money, why on earth would he want to go there? Like I grew up in Sacramento. If I was a basketball player, I wouldn't be like, send me to the Kings.
But I'll tell you what, at this stage in his career, it probably plays a part, right? He's got a young family now, right?
Yes.
Like 2 kids, I believe.
Yeah, I think. And I mean, look, the guy has spent the last 12 years, 11 years. 10 or 11 years in Houston, right? He's not going to go to Green Bay, Wisconsin or Buffalo, New York or Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania and play 8 games in frigid cold weather. Why would you force yourself to do that? And I mean, the truth of the matter is, as much as I don't necessarily feel like Arizona is like a JJ Watt away from going to the Super Bowl, I mean, like they got a young quarterback who they're not paying a ton of money to. They've got now a pretty decent duo on the defensive line with Watt, if he can stay healthy, and Chandler Jones. They've got some other pieces at linebacker. Patrick Peterson, we see what they do with him in the offseason. I don't know. I mean, like I feel like outside of, like the Bucks repeating and the Chiefs, like the Cardinals are probably in that next group of 8 to 10 teams.
They're not wrong by making the deal. If I'm being honest, it's kind of like, I could see that. I can see the plus, not just the money, but being close to home. Like if I'm being honest, if I'm his age and I'm like, I'm probably bowing out in 3 to 5. I don't want to spend like at least 2 of those years or 3 of those years away from my family.
Well, and you look at it, I mean, like Arizona is very popular with retirement people, right? I mean, so, Kurt Warner retired in Arizona. Emmitt Smith retired in Arizona.
Charles Barkley.
Well, yeah. Did he? No, I thought he retired in Houston. Didn't he?
No, I think he's in Scottsdale.
Oh, well, he lives there. I see what you're saying. I thought you meant like professional.
Oh, like a team. I'm thinking like
no, that dude played for the Rockets at one point when he was chasing a ring.
I would totally like just retire.
But that was the whole thing, was everybody was like, oh, he's chasing a ring, right? He's going to basically go
No, he's
play for
not.
cheap so he can go win a championship somewhere. And
I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
I think there's probably more of the person, like, you can say people are playing for the money, which is not wrong, but I think there's some more personal decisions when it comes down to that stuff. And like,
I agree.
we can't make these guys more than what they are. They're human beings, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, yes, at the end of the day, right, he's got to get in bed and lay next to his wife. And so the decision he makes is one that she ultimately needs to be okay with as well. And as much
Green
as
Bay.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, everybody will, oh, he's from Wisconsin. He's going to go home to play in Wisconsin. Oh, his brothers both play in, Pittsburgh. He's going to want to go play in Pittsburgh. And, Buffalo's a contender, and they could use some help on the defensive line. And it's like, yeah, okay, great. It's Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and Green Bay. Like, do you guys not see? I mean, even Seattle. Like, it's not like it's warm,
Even if it was Pittsburgh, I would buy a house in New York and just take the train to Pittsburgh. I would not live in Pittsburgh. No offense, Pennsylvania. But
yes, offense, Pennsylvania. Sorry, that's my job on this show, is to offend large groups of people.
I say it because I'm thinking it, not because I'm trying to make a dig. It's just like not my choice. So what else you got going on? You got any new I see you got a Fitbit. Are you wearing a Fitbit?
I am. Oh, geez. This whole new setup here is really throwing me for a loop. So, yes, I am rocking the Fitbit. Okay. I got the Inspire 2 for Christmas from my mom and dad. Cool. They were kind enough to get the whole family a set of Fitbits because we were getting into our activity and everything. What's funny is Christy had actually gotten me I don't even know, like a non-brand, off-brand Apple Watch.
Mm-hmm.
And it was nice. Like, it had some basic functionalities, but didn't have everything. Like, you couldn't do a lot of the stuff that you can do with the Apple Watch on it.
Right.
And so I wore that for like a week or two, and I had my Fitbit sitting in the drawer because I just hadn't gotten it set up and everything. And so I was sitting there charging the other one, and I was like, we're gonna go. Oh, well, that's what we were doing. We were going to do the KL walk. For breast cancer awareness this weekend. And so I was like, I'm going to wear my Fitbit on Saturday since we're going specifically to do like an exercise thing, and I'll just kind of see how it is. And I've literally like had it on ever since. Like, I don't think I've taken it off.
That's cool.
I love it. It's very simple. I like Christy. The main reason that she had gotten me the Apple Watch thing was because she's like, you never get notifications. And it's true. Like, people would call me, yeah. I would get text messages, and it's a stupid thing where it's like, is my phone ringing? No, my phone's ringing. Nothing's happening. I don't feel it. Like, how is it that I have phantom phone ring that I feel when it's nothing? But when the thing is like, I'm like,
yeah, I know, because I've called you before. I'm like,
yeah, well, no, those I'm like,
all right.
But now I have no excuse. See, that's the real issue. My dad's like, he saw me wearing it and he was like, so now I know you're not just ignoring my call, or that you are just ignoring my calls. And I was like, I guess I'll have to answer your phone calls more often.
Yeah, my wife had I bought her the Fitbit a year ago, and she loved it. She wore it every day until I bought her the Apple Watch. And the only reason I got her the Apple Watch is because, like, she'll go for a walk and she doesn't want to take her phone with her.
Yeah.
But she really loved her Fitbit. Like, she wore it every day without fail. They're nice devices.
They are. It's very comfortable. That was the other thing. The band on the other watch was not comfortable. It had like a metal stud for attaching on the bottom, and that metal, the underside of it wasn't coated in anything. Like, it didn't have any, so it was just metal on skin, and it was just like, I don't like the way that this feels.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, I'm gonna bling out my band. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not. I used to have a family friend of the family, I guess is the way that most people state that, who had gotten into like Fitbit accessorizing, like doing bejeweled bands and stuff like that for Fitbits and everything. And I mean, like, was doing very well from what I could understand. Like, really? There was a huge market for that amongst the older white lady population.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah.
But yeah, so in addition to my new Fitbit, which I'm absolutely loving, I am giddy because Christy ordered a new Mac Mini.
Sweet.
Yeah, so that's going to be her new work desktop. And she had kind of been looking at some different stuff and was looking at laptops initially. And I had said something, I was like, Andre got one of those new Mac Mini M1s and he absolutely loves it. And she's like, yeah, I've been seeing a bunch of stuff. And she likes Mac products in general, wasn't like a fanboy or fangirl like I am. Fangirl, but has, enjoyed Mac products and whatnot, has her Apple Watch and her iPhone and everything. So, was considering Mac products, but was looking at that's what it was. She was looking at one of the, iMac Pros,
right?
And it was like $2,500, or something stupid like that. And I'm like, what? You can get like one of those Mac Mini M1s, and we can go find you like a nice monitor somewhere,
and you're not going to spend $2,500,
and it's going to be faster than that thing.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, what configuration? And so then I texted you and I was like, what did you buy? And you sent me the exact specs. And so I gave it to her and she plugged it in and she was like, okay. So yeah, like her work gave her a nice monitor. And then she ordered like she got the same USB-C port with the storage drive, separate that you got, which I think is already here because she got that stuff from Amazon.
That's cool. Yeah.
So yeah, like I'm very excited. She said something earlier today. She was like, let me know if FedEx shows, if you see the FedEx guy, I have to sign for something. I was like, oh, and she was like, it's not my Mac Mini. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man, I really, really love this thing. It's like, it really is freaking cool.
It will be my next computer. Like I have already decided if it's personal work, I don't care if I have to drown both of these in the ocean, like I'll do whatever it takes. But it's just, there's no way that I can justify like these other expenses and stuff, like the cost of these other devices aside from that.
Right. No, I tell you, like, one of the biggest things for me is the price. And we talked about it before. Like when I started shopping for computers, I'm like, I'm going to spend close to $2,000.
Yeah.
Like there's no way around that. I'm starting at $1,600 and I'll probably end up at like, $2,200.
And I mean, I think, like with the configuration that you got and that she ultimately, like it was right around $1,000, a little under $1,000, like 16 gigs of RAM, with the external hard drive and everything. So you got plenty of space there, which these days it's like, you don't really, I mean, if you have a laptop, it's maybe a little bit more important to have a larger, but even then, like I've got all my little Westgate, portable storage drives, the little notebook things, your passport that you plug in, and it's like boom, up and running.
It's actually Western Digital. But yeah, I know what you mean. You said Westgate.
Please don't correct me in public.
I just did. It's payback.
Look,
so
audience, if you are in search for a new Jeep, Dodge, or Chrysler vehicle, visit Westgate Jeep, Dodge, and Chrysler.
They also sell hard drives.
They also sell hard drives now. I don't know if you knew that.
No, but yeah, it's a really good computer. Like I really enjoy it. Did I tell you I got the Air also?
You did. You told me that you ordered it. Has it arrived?
Yeah, it has.
How do you like it?
They're like for the amount of money I was going to buy for one computer, I literally got two.
Yeah. See, that's the other thing I keep looking at is I'm thinking I was just having this conversation with Helena the other day. It's like the difference between wants and needs, right? Like I need to drink water. I need to breathe air. I want a cookie. One of these things is not like the other. And she was like, yeah, I don't need to breathe. I'm fine. Give me the cookie.
Give me the cookie. Like, stop using all your words that mean nothing to me.
Basically, those are a whole bunch of words that mean no.
Yeah.
What was the question?
You were saying like you were talking about that like the other day. Gosh.
Oh, yes. Okay. So what I want is to have a Mac Mini M1 for my desktop for doing this. Like I would love to have
Right.
just a dedicated machine for us doing our podcast and all the editing and everything. And then I want a MacBook Air, so that I can take it on the road when I have to go travel and visit customers and stuff like that.
And that's what makes the most sense, like although I don't travel as much, there are times where, even in the house, I don't want to
Yeah.
be pinned up in my office the whole time. And even like, there is a reason for owning a laptop. It more than likely shouldn't be your primary computer.
Yeah.
Like if I'm being honest, I can do 85% of the stuff I need to do on my phone, which I still find kind of freaky.
So that was going to be I mean, like eventually they're going to introduce these chips into like the tablets and stuff too, right?
Yeah, they're coming out with a new iPad Pro, and rumor has it it'll be just as fast as the M1.
Because that's the other thing that I started thinking was it's like maybe you just get an iPad for the road.
Yes,
with a keyboard, a separate,
Yeah.
because they got the Bluetooth keyboards and everything. And
it
again,
it all depends on the applications you need to use. Like
Yeah.
if you're only using spreadsheets on Google Docs or something like that, doesn't really matter.
Right.
Like call it a day.
yeah,
You can even buy a Chromebook if I'm being honest. I've seen some pretty sweet Chromebooks out there, but I just can't. I don't see spending $500 for a Chromebook, like in my mind.
yeah. I mean, that is the hang up, I guess, for me as well. It's like, I mean,
Yeah.
I dropped $3 and change on the one for Helena, and it's okay.
Right.
Like a lot of things, like it was really nice at first, and then it's gotten a little bit slower over time, but it hasn't had the same kind of like steep drop off that I've experienced with low end laptops previously.
Right.
Cost,
Right.
it's
Right.
low in cost. Because I mean, it's a Samsung, so it's like it's a nice, decent machine,
Right.
and it's working great for her. It's just me when I get on it and I'm like, do all of this. And it's like, no, I
And
don't.
that's the thing that you always want to think about. Like, so if you were to, like, it's like with anything, what are the applications you use? Are you going to edit a podcast on the road?
Right.
Are these things going to be something that you're going to do routinely? And I still found the M1 as being like, when we do travel, we have a couple of trips planned, maybe in the summertime. I'm probably going to be writing code. So it's like,
Yeah.
I got to make sure I can, compile and do all this other stuff, not like heavy, but I want to make sure that my setup is the way it is.
Just bring a pad and paper with you. Write it that way.
Yeah. Oh, all these bytes should do something. So that's how I look at it. It's kind of like, I think it's for the amount of money I was going to spend for one computer, I was able to buy two computers that I can grow with and probably use for the next 5 or 6 years and not feel bad about it, And the storage thing, like the pricing that Apple does for the internal storage, it doesn't make sense. It's almost $100, I think, per 250 gigabytes or something like that, or 500. I don't
Yeah.
remember, but it's like, it didn't make sense to me. And I don't, even as like writing software, and I'll tell you why, I would never get like a super large hard drive. It's for two reasons. One, I'll clone a repo on the project I'm working on. I'll clone that repo into my computer.
Mhm.
And when I'm done with that project,
Right. You
Like,
push it back up to
I
the
push it back.
repository.
and then I delete it from my laptop. If there are tweaks, I typically do that in my office. But I clone all my repos, like they're not disposable, but I don't need to have stuff like that on my laptop.
See, but I think that that's where you differ from a lot of people, right? Is just in terms of your tech savviness and your understanding of how to access those things on multiple machines. Using a service like a GitHub, or what have you, that allows you to push and pull that information to different machines, right? And be able to
Right.
manage the branches of your code and everything. You get that when you don't have somebody like me jumping in and
Like
force commit. Just ram it in there. But most people, even like myself included, I think struggle at times with like coming up with a unified digital storage kind of management plan.
You
It's
want
like,
to figure something I just figured, like really, really thought about and figured out. And I'm not trying to cut you off, but
No.
it was like, this will help a lot of people, right? So let me tell you so I'll tell you this, the background is I set up my laptop to mirror 99% of the functionality I need on my laptop in like 2 hours
Okay,
because I had
wait.
to
You
download
said laptop and laptop both times.
laptop and desktop,
Okay.
right? So I have all the functionality that, like stuff, right? The 1% is because I store some applications on the external hard drive.
Right.
But I was playing around with Microsoft. I had to edit a document for my wife, and I pulled the document from my email. Word opened it up, and it saved it to OneDrive.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on my laptop. I'm like, but I don't have OneDrive. I have it on my computer, but it's not syncing. It automatically stores it in the cloud for you. And I was like, son of a gun. So I have a terabyte of space for like workable documents
Yeah.
that never actually sit on my computer. And it kind of makes sense on why come hard drives, even Windows laptops, they don't start out with this, godly amount of storage.
Yeah.
They're assuming you're going to get like like Microsoft. And if you haven't bought Office 365, you should do it. It's actually a pretty good deal.
Yeah. But I mean, worst case scenario, you've got 15 free gigs on Google.
Yeah.
There are options out there for you to
Yeah.
be able to have cloud storage that is available to you on a number of different devices.
Yeah.
I think personally, I struggled with feeling safe or, I had some concerns about security in terms of uploading stuff to the cloud. And then I have like a huge phobia of uploading stuff and then it disappearing, like having a some sort of massive failure. And, it's like, well, I deleted all of the backup. I mean, like I have
You're
issues with
paranoid,
this stuff
yeah.
sometimes. In
So
terms of
I use Nextcloud for like personal documents, like my archive, right? So, and it's like I have it. So I have Nextcloud running on one of my servers. I don't recommend people do this, but you can probably like get an online version of Nextcloud. But it's on one of my servers, but I have an external hard drive, but it's only 80 gigs because you'll never like if you have documents that go beyond like I don't know 500 gigs or like 60 gigs, you got more problems than like the average file is less than like 2 megabytes, and that's
Sure.
a big PDF for the most part. And I sync Nextcloud to my computers, but I also back it up to my backup drive that it backs up my computers.
Mhm.
So I have a backup solution there. Most of my working documents live in Google Docs, or now I might even start using Microsoft Office because that was like, oh crap, it's totally not on my computer, and I don't need to have it offline. So it's those are things that when you think about it that way, you're not going to have a nightmare situation. So
yeah, I mean, and that's a fair. I think that's where I have kind of historically been, right? Is it's
Yeah.
like I will keep one copy on an external hard drive and then have a copy that's uploaded to a server. When if it comes to photos and stuff like that, that's always how I've been, like
right,
I probably have 4 or 5 different
hard
backup
drives.
editions of old hard drives or even old CDRs that I used to burn photos to when I was having to do reformatting of my computer. And it's like, here's my 12 disc iTunes backup and my 16 CD photo library. And look, most of those pictures are the same 5 picture, or I took 5 at the same time or whatever because it was all the digital crap and I just never went through it and actually deleted it.
Right, right.
That's probably one of the biggest things for me now. These episodes are what take up the bulk of my storage. But again, what I have is a 1 terabyte Western Digital hard drive that I plug in, and basically as soon as we're done and I save everything, I make a copy of it. When I edit everything on the hard drive here on my computer, then when I'm done, I move everything over and I delete it from my hard drive so that I
Right.
clear up
Well,
space
that's
that way.
smart. Yeah. Do you have an SSD hard drive? or just a regular like mechanical?
No, both of them are mechanical. I don't have an SSD. Christy got the same Samsung SSD that you've got.
Yeah.
I think the MacBook Pro has an SSD.
Right.
Because that one
And
got upgraded.
next time you buy an external drive, buy an SSD.
Yeah.
Like it's night and day difference when you're doing operations like you're doing.
That is one of the I mean, it'll take, because each one of these episodes, the raw file, like when we get done recording, is about 5 or 6 gigs, depending on how long we record. The
Merry
edited
Christmas.
the edited episodes with the raw, because I always save a copy of the raw and then I leave that alone essentially and do all of my editing in a separate file, so that if I mess anything up, I have the raw to go back to.
Right.
Those two combined with all of the edits and everything usually take up about 12 to 15 gigs per episode. So it can take 25 minutes sometimes for it to move, an episode folder from one to the other to copy it over.
What's the final compressed file?
Like the exported file?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a good question. I can look real quick, though.
I'm asking for a friend.
Who is this friend you speak of? Let's see. Episode. Oh, well, that would figure. I don't have any saved episodes on my computer, any final ones, because they're all on my external hard drives, which I also don't have down here, I don't think. And both of my USB plugs are currently occupied.
Okay.
So, anyways, the final file isn't massive because it basically just does remixes everything to combine it and then does a single audio file export. So it basically is like condensing it down to a single stereo track. Because right now, what it is it's basically like my audio track, your audio track, both in mono, and then we have the intro music and then all of the topic intros, and then the outro music.
50 megabytes, or is it like 100 megabytes?
I want to say it's like half a gig.
So about 500 megabytes for
roughly, if I recall correctly. I'm throwing that out there, and I'm going to look later, and I'm going to be like, wow, that was so wrong, and people are going to listen to this episode and be like, what a freaking moron, this guy has no idea. Which just reminds me of this episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine I was watching the other night, where like cyber crimes division moves into their building and basically reworks all of the internet so that they get all of the bandwidth and none of the other departments do. And so they're going down and like, we need the bandwidth back. And he's like, all right, well, how many kbps do you want? And he's like, 50, 4. Okay, I'll give you 4 kilobytes per second. Yeah. Like that's what I feel like somebody's gonna listen to this and be like, half a gig, what an idiot. Muffy, come listen. This man has no idea.
I would guesstimate.
Who the fuck calls their kid Muffy?
I don't know.
That's a terrible nickname.
You want to hear what I did on Twitter?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We will wrap this episode up with this because I had no idea that you managed to get our Twitter account banned temporarily. Suspended is the right word.
Yeah. I feel bad. So there was some
guy. Don't feel too bad. You're up there with the president, the former president of the United States, as having been suspended. I mean, if the president can do it, so can Andre.
There is a black guy, a Trump supporter. He's like somewhat, I guess, Trump famous.
Okay. He's MAGA famous.
Yeah, and
he's not mega famous, but he's MAGA famous.
Man, he did some coon stuff, man. And somebody said there's a name that that just happened.
That got weird.
I know, right? There's a name for people that
your camera angle just changed.
Oh, really? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, but like now it's like much wider and a little higher.
All right. Look, that's that brand new camera, dude.
Wait, so were we using the other camera before?
Yeah.
Weird.
Whoa. No, we were using this camera. Maybe it freaked out because FaceTime opened up.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not going to mess with it.
Yeah, it's all good.
Anyway.
No worries. Anyways, so
And somebody said, well, there's a name that Black Americans use to call somebody that did what you did. And he goes, I can't say it.
And Andre was like, I can.
I said, I can. There's actually a few of them. Coon, Porch, blank, blank. And I just listed them all, and I assigned it A. And I wanted to take it back, but it pissed me off. So, like, I was so angry at just the ignorance of what this guy was showing. It's like, come on, man. There's got to be. And I do not like Donald Trump.
Yes.
I hope he goes to prison. That is a fact. But it just, him and Candace Owens, this black kid and Candace Owens, it's like, yo, and I was reading this article about her the other day. Apparently she had an anti-Trump website before like 2015.
Yeah.
And all this other, it's like, you guys are just sellouts.
That's all it is. I mean, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I had read something very similar where it was talking about Candace Owens, and it was like, you literally were pitching your shilling to the left, and when you realized that nobody was buying your story, you went to the only other audience that was left. And in order to do that, you had to completely flip everything that you had been pitching and had absolutely no qualms about doing.
Yeah, it pissed me off. It's just like, and I call this guy and they Twitter labeled it as hate speech.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to give some context to what the previous commenter was trying to get
Yeah,
across.
I'm sure that's all you were trying to do, Andre.
I mean, and so, yeah, so if I offended anybody, I didn't mean to. I'm not going to apologize. That's literally what I think of the guy. He is a coon. He is a sellout. He's an Uncle Tom. And apparently you can't say those things on Twitter because they call it hate speech. Can it be hate speech if it's coming from another black person? I don't know.
Look, I'm certainly not. I guess I don't have a dog in that fight. Is the way to kind of. I think you've used that term before, but it's kind of like, hey, that doesn't really affect me directly because those aren't terms that I'm ever going to use to describe somebody. But yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I think, look, I can certainly understand where in certain contexts, that absolutely is, a form of hate speech. But yeah, it's
sad. And I know we kind of touched on politics the last couple of weeks, but on a serious note, I'm exhausted, and I'm actually kind of like, exhausted, but aware I'm exhausted of the conversation. But my exhaustion comes with awareness. I know that in upcoming elections, I'm going to vote. I'm going to still do my research. I'm exhausted because the media has this really weird, fascination with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it's because it is for ratings. I'm not sure what we should know what the state of the GOP is. Yes. But giving this guy that much free press it's insane.
It is. I mean, it's exactly what they did in 2015 and 2016. It was, look at this circus show, everybody. Can you believe that this is an actual candidate for president of the United States? And what they didn't, I don't think at the time, at least early on, fully understand that they were doing was completely legitimizing what this man was saying. That CNN literally stopped everything that was going on to cut to live broadcasts of any Donald Trump press conference. Do you know, right. I'm sure you've heard this stat, the number of times that they've showed like Biden press conferences now is like off a cliff. Nobody cares. Could not care less about, cutting away from live coverage of something else to go show the press conference of this sitting president of the United States of America.
Well, to be fair, he hasn't done any, but they do show parts of the daily press conference.
Yeah.
Now, here's my conundrum. I watch I know we're running long, but I need to probably get this out of my head. I watch reliable sources on Sunday. I watch the Shmerkana show on Saturday. And one thing I'm actually figuring out is that in between those two shows, everything else, when it comes to certain topics, is just sensationalized crap.
Yeah.
And it's not even newsworthy. I appreciate Smirkanish because he's very objective. His lawyer shows a lot. And it's typically what I'm doing when I'm making breakfast on Saturday morning. I'm listening to Smirkanish. I watch reliable sources because I want to kind of get a pulse of how is the media responding to their responsibility of actually reporting the news. And I think they're on the fence. I don't think they have a good way to pivot out of what's become normalized over the last 4 to 5 years.
I mean, yeah, I still go back. For me personally, it began on September 11th, 2001. Like, that was the beginning of that 24-hour news cycle for me. That was the first event that I really was so engrossed in, that I stayed up just mindlessly consuming news television, hoping for some glimmer of, like, understanding, like why this had happened, or who was ultimately responsible and what we were going to do about it. And I mean, I was living in Greensboro at the time, and there was the ridiculous belief that because Greensboro has all of those large natural gas storage tanks along I-40, that we were somehow going to be next on the Taliban's, hit list.
Right.
And so there were people in my school that were like, convinced that, like, we got planes coming for us next. We need to be out here watching out for this stuff. And, I certainly was never of that. I was kind of like, guys, that's pretty ridiculous. That's pretty far down the list. Look at the targets that they actually went after. And they were much more symbolic than they were
infrastructure or
exactly
like strategic. Yeah.
And so, but it did, like, still just create this, I mean, almost like a need for an answer. Like, there was that question of why this happened and how this happened, how we let something like this happen. And then it was so quickly pivoted to, we're going to war, like, it's war in Iraq, it's war in Afghanistan, it's all of this stuff in the Middle East. That is the problem. That is where all of our problems have come from. And if we can just, go in and liberate the people that want us there and provide freedom and infrastructure and, give them the chance at democracy that we have, then all of our problems will be solved. And it's like, then you start doing your actual history learning and realize that this is the same game that we've played for the last God knows how long, where we go in and we bomb the shit out of some place and we say it's under the, guise of liberation and freedom. And then we take whatever resources we can and we kind of go, well, we're really sorry that this shit's all on fire, but this is what you guys wanted, right? We'll see you later.
I tell you what, man, I my exhaustion probably hit a new level when I heard sitting U.S. senators telling the president of the United States he needed to get permission to attack Syria. And that just opened up the whole, are you guys kidding me?
They're high. I mean, they have to be. Like, you can't, he is the leader of the executive branch.
Yeah.
Like, that's his job. He's not going to war. He's not declaring war on Syria. Like, and where the hell have you guys been for the last 4 years?
That's my point.
Right?
It's just like, you guys are kidding me. The Democrats, Bernie Sanders, Tim Kaine, like, it's inevitable that they're going to probably have just as much infighting as the Republicans.
Yeah, because it comes down to a fight for power, right? This fight for influence within the party. And the belief is that if Bernie and Tim Kaine, for Bernie, he's planted his flag, right? Like, we know where Bernie Sanders sits, and he doesn't give a flip about upsetting the Democratic Party. Like, that's never been anything that he's super concerned with. But what you are seeing is, especially I think amongst the senators, more of this division of, oh, Joe Biden's too moderate. This is too much of what we've always seen from the president. And I mean, on what planet did we think that electing Joe Biden was some massive progressive achievement? Like, that's not who Joe Biden is, guys. He was never going to be that person.
Right.
You know, in your best scenario, people out there who want this massively progressive, president, he's setting the stage for something more progressive to come down the pipeline, right? I mean, we've talked that the GOP has essentially locked themselves out of federal elections for the next 2 to 3 cycles. So if you've got one term of this Biden-Harris ticket, right, or administration at this point, whatever the next thing is, Harris, whoever, right, Buttigieg, Tim Kaine, but that's where I think like you're starting to see this stupid pivot right now, right? Like I've got to plant my flag because if I'm not the first person to do it, then I'm not going to be the person who's selected as the next candidate. And this whole idea, like we have just created a career out of being a politician, and that is so far from term limits for senators. Yes, freaking, you should have a term limit for the total amount of years you can be in government.
Yeah.
Fuck, I don't care if you spent 20 years as a senator. You don't get to be president now because you wasted all of your time as a senator.
I think the and I'm not trying to be doom and gloom on this. It's just that the writing's on the wall and the pieces are set up to where I'm not wrong.
Here's what I'm really like. It won't happen, but this is what I think should ultimately, like, if people and politicians could pull their heads out of their asses, I'm not going to bleep asses, so I'll just say it, and realize that it's not about the extremes, right. All of you GOP members who maybe didn't say enough over the last 4 years, but have actually finally decided that the insurrection that occurred at the Capitol on January 6th was enough for us to say, yeah, we don't want those crazies as part of our party anymore. And for you moderate liberals, Democrats who say, yeah, as much as I, believe that some of these things are really important and we need to get there, I also think we need to be very responsible in the way that we do it fiscally, right?
Right.
Freaking just get rid of the trash. Like, you guys, come together, fix this shit. You're so close, so much closer to each other here than you are to the own people in your party.
Right.
And you can't, it's not even that they don't see it, because I know that they know it. But they're so scared. They are so terrified of losing their position, their influence.
I listened to a congresswoman from, I want to say she was from New York or maybe Illinois, that, and we're long, but I got to get this out of my head because it'll sit there and fester. She was talking about the college debt thing again. And she made the statement that the elimination of $50,000 worth of college debt is going to be part of the racial reckoning the country needs.
Okay.
And maybe she's right in some aspects, but I don't think the two things are entirely related. I think the bigger issue is, why is school so expensive? Have we thought about the actual problem that we're trying to solve? And, if you have feedback on it, if you have I'm just asking because this is my question. So you're saying to me that you're going to eliminate $50,000 worth of debt, for keyword, operative word being debt. Mm-hmm. Just because. What about the person what about a junior or a senior in college, or their last year in college, and they've got $50,000 in debt because they didn't graduate? Are they awarded the same like debt forgiveness? If the answer is no, you haven't solved the problem. You made the problem worse. What about the fact that there's still a good majority of Americans that may take out personal loans for college debt? You're only forgiving the government-backed loans. There's a lot of things where, if it were me, and I think it's a good first step of $10,000, that makes sense. Like, let's fix that. Let's let's do that and let's restructure. Let's look at,
Yeah.
actual solutions
See,
to
and
the
that's
problem.
that's where I think I'm with you in that I'm I don't think that just straight up debt forgiveness, or wiping it out, whatever, however you want to look, absolution of it is ultimately. I mean, you're still, I think, like,
You're kicking the can.
yeah, you're taking an ibuprofen because your tooth hurts, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, yeah, for the next couple hours your tooth doesn't hurt, but in the meantime that cavity is getting way worse, right? Like, now you got to go have a root canal instead of just getting a filling done. And I
Right.
feel like that's where we keep going with this. Is it's like, well, the problem is we have too many people who are in debt, so we need to get rid of the debt. Okay, what happens to all of the people who have now extended that debt, right? And we're talking about the government-backed programs, initially, but like you said, there are lots of programs outside of CFI and these other government education loan programs that people use. I mean, you think about the for-profit colleges and
Right.
all of the predatory loans that are used in that. You're not going to help any of those people out. Like, what are we doing to prevent these things from happening further down the road? We can't just simply sit here and say, all right, at this very moment in time, we're going to magically make some of this debt disappear. And then we're just going to, I mean, it's essentially saying, okay, right now we're going to go ahead and print $3 trillion worth of money so we can pay off our national deficit, right? Boom, problem solved. Okay, except now literally money is not worth anything. Like,
Right.
What are you guys ultimately doing? How are we really, because it's just, you're just kicking the can down the road. You're leaving it for somebody else to have to fix. And I mean, like, in a lot of ways, I feel like that's where we've been from a government standpoint in this country for a while, where it's like, well, the next generation is going to have to solve, climate change. The next generation is going to have to solve the gender wage gap. The next generation will have to solve, educational debt. And it's like, okay, when is the next generation actually going to get here? Because right now we're just making problems for everybody else. And, I mean,
Now people aren't having kids, and like that's why I'm exhausted.
Yeah, exactly. There's not going to be a next generation at some point. Like,
that's why I'm sitting back and I'm like, there are bright spots, and I'm pleased that we have a president that, from my assessment, is trying to show leadership.
well, while not making it all about himself. I mean, you pointed out the man has not actually attended any individual press briefings himself. He's let his very qualified, press secretary go out there and do that for him
And do their job.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's where it's like, okay, and my exhaustion is not because of the news cycle. My exhaustion is because the target's not moving.
Yeah.
The target is still the target. The problem is, how do we actually address the issues? And I don't think that we as a country have committed to doing the actual work to solve problems. And aside from, I love my computer, and it's kind of like, I finally got to articulate how I feel about it. It's like the problem's still there. We dealt with this at E area, and I'd always say, well, we didn't solve the problem.
Yeah.
We literally just kind of avoided the problem, and we're gonna revisit this in 90 days.
Yeah. I mean, our our weekly meetings. I won't even use this stupid term. No, I will. Our P10 meetings that we used to have, and it's like there would be things where it's like issues, right? Our team completely revamped that whole thing, because after the first like 3 or 4 months, I think, of going through it, we're like, this is so useless. Like, we're literally putting things on here and saying there's nothing we can do about them, but we don't want to lose visuals, we don't want to lose the visual of it. Visibility. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so we're going to keep it on here. But then all it does is every single week remind you, we still haven't solved this problem. Like, so you start drowning in your own problems as opposed to fixing any of the ones that you actually can. And there was no path created or designated for taking those problems to that next level and actually getting some sort of resolution. And that's where we started figuring out, like, how do we just do this on our own? Yeah. Right? That was when we got into the whole idea of, let's not ask permission, let's provide a proof of concept and show them that this is actually working before
and then
we
move
even
on.
say anything.
and like I think that's it's a bold step, and it's hard to do that, but and that's where we kind of, we help each other. I am not you. I don't. It's not that I'm not polished. I've just I've hit a lot of brick walls, and I know some things just don't work. It's like, dude, we can do that. It's just not going to work. You go smile and make everybody feel better about it, but let's like kind of hide and figure out a real path forward.
This is what made our partnership work so well in business, was that, like, yeah, between the two of us, I am not bold enough on my own usually to sit there and go, this is what we have to do, or to tell somebody like, no, you're wrong. Like, I will sit there and entertain ideas all day long and tell somebody that, their ideas are valid and all this other feel good stuff that I grew up with. But yeah, like, at the same time, I will also go smile politely for the executives and, sit in the boring meetings and stuff that are absolutely killing you, And so, like, I still look back, and I tell pretty much everybody that I talk to about you that it's like, I don't know, it feels very serendipitous is really the best word that I can come up with in my SAT vocabulary. That you and I ended up not only, like, knowing each other, but working together and getting to do the things that we did, because I just think that you and I were such a good match for what needed to happen at that time. Like, I don't know. I still look back on those times so fondly, if only because I learned so much and feel like I grew as an individual and, like, as an employee, well beyond what I should have been capable of growing in the time that I was there. And I really do attribute so much of that to you and the help that you provided. And I know this is not supposed to be one of those, like, Andre hates it when I praise him and say nice things about him, but
So I'll make you feel better this one time.
okay.
He's like, if you ever want to know what's wrong with me, there's a couple people in my life you can look at and say, it's your fault. When I was a construction worker, I worked with one of the coolest people on the planet. And he always took the time to show me stuff. And I started to expect that of anybody I ever worked with that was like my manager or whatever. I expected of myself.
God, no wonder you hated me when you first started working there. Show
like,
me what you're doing. All I hear is clickety clack, clickety clack, clickety clack.
And I learned from that experience because I was a city kid. I never built anything. He would take the time to show me things. He was actually he went to college to be a software developer, ironically, and decided that he didn't want to do that anymore. But he's always taken, and I tell him when I talk to him, like, dude, like, you have shown me the type of person I want to be, even when I don't want to be that person, because I know it's the right thing. And that is a life lesson I try to mimic, make my own, and to share because it helped me. And I really do believe that people don't do things because they don't want to. It's typically because they don't know how to. People don't try to do the right thing because it's hard. I can accredit that to a guy named Ed Stanberry that, I used to struggle with that. He said, the right thing to do is, the reason people don't do the right thing is because it's hard. And if it was easy, more people would do it. And I remember that, 20 plus years later. So I do believe that part of my life is to try to pay it forward. There's a thing in the Black community where we, as a culture and as a community, as a group of people, we've stopped doing, where that was part of our culture. And I recognize that, and I try to do something about it. And it has nothing just to do it with Black people, but to do with people in general. It's the right thing to do. It's hard, and that's why I don't like people. I don't like people to say I'm doing things. I just want to do my job.
Look, I certainly don't. I never thought that you were doing it for any reason other than you felt like it was the right thing for you to do. You know what I mean? Like, look, I don't want to get too deep into it, but you were put in a position where you could have very easily said, no, like, I'm not doing this. I have more experience. I have more know-how. I've been at this company long enough that you should not be putting me underneath this guy who's literally never managed a team that didn't work at a movie theater or a Starbucks. Like, that was the truth of it, you know? And instead, you said, I'm going to teach this guy to be the manager that ultimately I need him to be for us to be successful. It wasn't about your feelings or, you know, anything like that. It was just like, you saw an opportunity to help me become more than what I was. And you did. Like, you sat there. We had 2 meetings a week for an hour plus sometimes, where you would just say, this is what you're doing wrong. And not in like a dick way, but like, dude, you've been banging your head against that same wall for the last couple of weeks. And every time you come in here, we're still talking about it. When are you going to do something about it? And it made me realize, like, you know, a lot of the times I am the source of my own frustration because I'm not doing the things that I recognize need to be done, often because I'm afraid I'm going to hurt somebody's feelings, you know, or because I'm afraid of what somebody's reaction or response is going to be. And that was one of the things that you helped me overcome early on, was like, I still say this to this day. Like, what's the worst that could happen? They're going to hit you, right? Somebody's going to punch you in the face. That's the worst thing. And yeah, like, that sucks, but it's not that bad, right? Like, I mean, it's not that bad. And most of the time, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Especially in business. That rarely happens.
There's a 99.9% chance that you're not going to get punched in the face. Well, yeah. And yeah.
I know. I'm just making you all kinds of uncomfortable by flattering you. And I don't mean to. I'm not doing it just to make you uncomfortable, but it's important to me that you know, and that anybody that does listen knows, you know, how much your friendship and everything that you have done for me over the years has meant, and that I recognize and I appreciate it. And I hope that, you know, in some ways I've been able to enrich your life in the ways that you have been able to enrich mine.
Dude, I surround myself with people that make me feel completely uncomfortable, that challenge me to remember.
So I make you feel uncomfortable.
You know what I mean?
You just said.
So what I'm saying is you
don't like being around me. You're like, now, you're right. I don't like being around you.
this moment right here. No, actually, it's true. Like I've had, and I'm not like a feelings person. I think the world knows that. My point is, like, I surround myself. I'm the closest with people that challenge me to be the person that I can be. And I think most people, you know, more people should do that, you know, like all of my closest friends, Chris included, and it's a very small circle. You guys, I told you a few weeks ago, you guys all have the same qualities. It's like, oh man, I freaking hate you.
I hate your freaking constant optimism. Why aren't you more realistic?
Or it's more like, man, I can do that. I can be that person. You know, and a lot of it's, you fight your own programming.
Yeah. That's one of the other things I started listening to recently is a book. I don't remember the author. I'll find it out for next time, but it's Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and it's this whole, it's a little hippy dippy in a lot of ways, where it's basically like, if you think that you're rich, you are, you know, like, or this belief that somehow, you know, now we can focus on a specific outcome from the past and somehow we can measure some impact that had. It's some crazy ass shit, but there are some core tenets to that I think are very true, in that, you know, like, we are creatures of comfort, right? And so that rituals, the habits that we have, that we fall back on, that we find very comforting and easy, are not always the things that we should be doing. And so finding out, you know, just changing your mindset and being able to recognize that can be very important. But
the hardest part is actually acknowledging that, right? Like understanding, like, why you responded that way. Like, you know, when something's off.
Yeah.
But what do you do about it? So, dude, you know I love you. And
better.
And again, all of my closest friends challenged me to be a better person, and I hope I do the same for them. And I do it because at the end of the day, as we all know, I'm a person of faith. I drink beer, smoke cigars, and I may drop a couple F-bombs, but I
he
think
still loves Jesus.
I still do. It's my dude. So, yeah. And I'm actually writing some stuff about, well, I'm actually doing a Mac M1 Mini review, and
Nice.
I can't wait to finish that. But as always, you can always check us out at chrisandandreshow.com. That's where we put our musings and ramblings and stuff that doesn't fit into a 2-hour and 27-minute podcast.
Even Chris's like 5-word movie reviews that he could totally fit into a 2.5-hour podcast.
You can also listen to us on SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Google Play, or Google Music. And if you go to our website and you listen to us on something else, like I listen to us on Plex, and put our RSS feed into your favorite podcast application, shoot us an email at the chrisandandreshow@gmail.com. That will be changing here shortly. I won't tell you when, but it'll be changing pretty soon. But we really do appreciate the people that listen, and you have no idea how much we appreciate it. We talk regularly, not just on this podcast, and it's kind of cool to see that we have listeners throughout the world, which is dope and amazing.
Shout out to Boulder, Colorado.
I know, right? Please get me Broncos tickets.
Please send me brownies.
Yeah, I know, right? So if you like what you hear, share it with us. Give us some feedback. You can catch us on Twitter at Chris and Andre. Facebook doing something, not sure what it is.
I did post something on there like this last week.
Okay. All right.
Or 2 weeks ago.
Hopefully I don't get us banned from Twitter because I don't have to live on Facebook.
Seriously. If I have to start promoting our podcast exclusively on my own personal Twitter handle, I'm going to be very upset with you. Or if we have to, God forbid, change the name of the show.
I know, right?
Oh, all the redirect work you'd have to do. That would be a nightmare.
I would be so.
I won't do that to you, I promise.
But we're so glad you joined us. As always, I'm Andre.
And I'm still Chris.
We'll talk to you soon.